Welcome to the Ordinary Discipleship Podcast, and I am here with the one and only Jessie Cruickshank.
Yeah.
And also joining us again today from California, Julia. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you have come to a spectacular episode. Oh, boy, you should pat yourself on the back because we are going to talk about the hero's journey. You might be asking yourself, what does that mean? I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure, but I'm going to figure it out in the next 20 minutes or so. The Ordinary Discipleship book, Jessie, you used this hero's journey in your book.
Yeah.
Can you first tell me what the heck is the hero's journey?
Well, we use it as a map for disciple making.
I see. Okay.
Because there's a universal aspect to it. So my girl Julia studied this specifically. Like, she's also passionate about it, and I love the way that you talk about it.
Okay. I think she's deferring to you.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yes.
So let me ask you, Chris,
Yeah.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
I am such a Star Wars nerd.
Yes.
I am a Star Wars nerd. I made my grandfather drive me 60 miles to see the debut of Empire Strikes Back. I had all the play sets. I know yes.
So for all of us Generation Xers
Yeah.
who grew up with Star Wars.
Represent!
Represented.
whoop,
It was my
whoop.
first VHS set, on my little
Yes.
13-inch, VHS
Wore it out.
TV. Yep, absolutely wore it out. That is the hero's journey, right? It's Luke Skywalker encounters a problem, and he is faced with the dilemma of whether or not he's going to choose to be a Jedi. And what does he do? He says, no, I'm going home. I have responsibilities. I'm going to tap out. And that's what he does.
Needs some power converters.
And he needs power converters.
I don't want to do the moisture evaporators. Uncle Owen? Jeez. Worst actor ever. But man, that was great.
Right? And
Mark Hamill. I mean,
what
come on.
happens? He's forced into becoming a Jedi because his aunt and uncle get killed, right?
Yeah,
like something happens and he's forced into becoming
Leaves
a Jedi.
blaster marks too.
Right? See, there you go. You can quote it better than I can. Right?
Yeah.
So that's what he does. He's forced into a journey that he wasn't expecting to happen, and then along the way he meets a guy.
Yeah.
Meets a guide who trains him into how to become a Jedi, and then he has his climax moment where he is facing Darth Vader. Right?
What a rough journey. He figures out his sister's the princess.
Right, exactly. So it obviously ends super well. Well, George Lucas actually studied under a guy at USC called Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell was an English professor that studied all the the mythic stories of cultures all around the world throughout the centuries, and what he discovered is that there was an archetype, that this is an ancient archetype throughout history of what he calls the hero's adventure. And so he wrote about the power of a myth. And essentially what it is, it's a death and resurrection experience. You have a hero that encounters a problem, that meets a guide who gives them a plan and then takes them on into a successful outcome. And so I had learned about this from a marketing perspective. If anybody's familiar with Donald Miller, this is what he's done with building a story brand. That's how you go through, you walk people through that change. And I was doing that in church communications and in marketing and communications. And I began to think, how can I do this for discipleship? Because I was also pastoring a church at the time. And so as I began to map that out, as only God can do, I end up meeting a guy randomly who interviews me for something and says, you should meet a friend of mine. Her name's Jessie Cruickshank, and she's writing a book on the hero's journey of discipleship. And turns out she's like a brain science person and everything. So Jessie and I met, and we began to talk and geek out on this hero's journey. But I'll just give you a real brief overview, and then Jessie can tell you all the fancy stuff about it. So she and I she had been teaching for 20 years, the hero's adventure, the hero's journey. And she went through the really, the whole 12-step process that Joseph Campbell does. And what she and I did was simplify it. And essentially what we saw is that it's actually a map for discipleship. It's not just a map for marketing or anything. It's actually the way that God has wired us to change. So God takes an ordinary person who answers the call. By the way, we always answer the call no first, and we can get into all the scriptures of that. Who answers the call, who teams with others to learn new things, that feels the struggle, and then experiences a revelation, and then at the end lives changed by Jesus. And if you look at the map, and the show notes, we'll link to that specific outline that we have. But if you look at the map, you go through a death and resurrection experience, and that's how you live changed at the end of it. And so, and then the other piece of it for us is also just then as disciple makers, right? What it does is by seeing that kind of journey mapped out and you see kind of the ebb and flow of how discipleship take place, I can then meet somebody and say, oh, they are answering the call. I can help them discern that season that they're in, or I can help them. I need to pull back because when it comes time to actually feeling the struggle and experiencing revelation, they have to do that piece of it at the end, just like Frodo throwing the ring into the ring of fire at the end, right? So there's different elements to this map of discipleship that you see, and if you understand it, if you can just get a glimpse of it, I know it's helped me to understand where people are at in their discipleship process and to be able to name it.
Yeah. So I was introduced to the hero's journey by my brother, who was actually attending USC Film School in 2003.
Oh, cool.
So in 2003, he's like, oh my gosh, like this amazing thing. And I read the book and learned about it. And as a neuroscientist, was most intrigued by the fact that it's in every culture because I really like those things that are universal to us as humans, because each individual human is too different. And that seems like a lot of work to figure out if you're going to be a teacher. I was going to be a teacher or a disciple maker. And so I was like, wow, this is universal. That means that we can actually talk about this with everybody. And we had just gone bigger with the wilderness ministry, Solid Rock Outdoor Ministries, and we were starting to teach the people who would come on the expeditions the hero's journey at the beginning of the expedition, because we're like, okay, well, how do we frame this well for them? How do we help them know the adventure that they're about to go on? And that, there are going to be things that are amazing and there are going to be things that are very not amazing. And we just wanted to help prepare them emotionally for what's about to happen over the next 40 days. And so we would map out the hero's journey, and we would also show them where it was in Scripture. We would be like, okay, look at this. Where do you see this in Scripture? And they would talk about Moses and having to go into the wilderness and then being called back into Egypt.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Because even he was like no at first, right?
Right, he's at no. So he's at no at both parts. Like he actually has he has
two heroes
He has
journeys.
two heroes journeys, right?
Exactly.
So there's going into the wilderness.
Yeah.
And then there's coming back out and accepting the call to lead the people of Israel. The children of Israel themselves go through the hero's journey of leaving Egypt and being, they say no at the foot of Mount Sinai. And like bad stuff goes, they build a golden calf and they're like, I don't know, God on our terms, and they have to go through their own wilderness so that they're changed and then ready to go into the promised land. So there are, we could talk about multiple people and kind of map out their hero's journey, and in the show notes we can link to Peter's hero's journey. But we were teaching this to the people about to go on the expedition so that they would know, and they started to see, and we wanted them to see where they were on their own journey. Because what I believe personally is that the reason why it's universal is because God has put it in our hearts. And I think God has put it in our hearts because it's the story of our own lives. And as a disciple maker, because it's the journey we're all walking, that means that I can come alongside you and see where you're at in the journey. I can be like, oh, we're in this part of it. I know how to lean in. I know how to help. I know how to coach. Do you need new information? Oh, no, you just need me to hold space with you because you're in the part that only you can do, right? I can see what place you're in and take the right posture as a disciple maker. So even if I don't actually have any answers, I kind of know where we're at.
And how do you know?
So for me, it's by talking to the person and saying, what do you feel like God is doing in your life? No? Like, oh man, I don't have any answers. I've been really arguing with God. I'm really doubtful. Well, maybe I would argue with God if I was even brave enough to talk to God, but I'm really struggling with this. Okay, well, you're in the pit. You're in the dark spot.
Right.
You're feeling the struggle.
Yeah.
Right? And my job then is to be with you and help encouraging you to connect with God in that space. Or maybe we're having a conversation and you're like, oh, I feel like God is kind of challenging me, or maybe you don't even have that language. You're like, I kind of feel like maybe I'm supposed to, or maybe I want to do this thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit because you might be discerning a call, right? And if you're discerning the call, I'm there to help you through the no spot. So that we can get you to the yes and be like, okay, great. You're on the yes side of that. Who's God sending you with? Who's coming around you in this new place to help you do this? Who might be your mentor? Who might be your friends and allies and other people to journey with you?
Gotcha.
You know, so I can have a conversation with you and be like, okay, this is the moment that you're in your story. And I can know what I'm supposed to say or not say, right? Because in that moment, I'm not supposed to sit there and tell you all the struggles you're about to have.
Right.
That's not the time.
That's discouraging.
That's not the moment, you know? Or how do you find the people to journey with, right? Because every journey we actually do with other people.
Right.
So it's a map, even when we don't know where we're at.
So you talked about the hero's journey in discipleship, but what about the hero's journey in leadership?
So that's, I mean, you mentioned it with Moses, right? Moses goes through that 2 stages, and actually that's what we all do. Like as we're developing in our maturity throughout our lifetime, we go through two major transformations. We go through one that's really identity forming and one that's more authority forming. And so that second one is going to be what develops us in our leadership, in which we really can begin to, as Jessie says, hold space. Because I'm not then, like, if you're walking through something, it's not, I'm upset at you because, you know, you don't know how to process what you're going through in that moment. I can be so secure in who I am and who God's called me to be, that I can stand with you and by you while you're walking out that piece of your journey.
Okay.
Yeah. So we all have these seasons, these iterations, right? There are lessons that heaven is teaching us. There are adventures that heaven calls us on, and each one of those can be a hero's journey cycle. And when you're responsible for other people, then you're both going through your own journey while you're trying to help be a shepherd or a guide for them
that's a
theirs.
good point, because you're also, as the leader, you're going through your own hero's journey as you're trying to navigate that.
And usually your hero's journey is caused by their issues.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So their problems and your responsibility in that situation is actually the lesson of your own discipleship.
Wow.
And your own journey.
Because we're always a disciple and a leader. We're living in all the spaces at one time.
Right. And you said that earlier, like disciple and leadership's different, but it's so intertwined with each other, right? Yeah. Wow. That was a lot in about 13 or 14 minutes. And I don't know. Do you have anything else to like talk? I mean,
I would just encourage people to maybe spend some time reflecting.
Yeah.
Where are they in their own journey? Like what if they were going to map it out, and we actually do have a tool to help them.
Oh, so they can check that on the show notes.
They can check that on the show notes.
Yeah.
But to sit and go, where am I?
Have I destroyed the Death Star, or am I still on Tatooine?
On Tatooine, or am I in the middle of space? In between, just trying to figure some stuff out because I have an assignment, but I don't actually know what the struggle is.
Stuck at the Cantina Borg.
And what's so interesting, right? You know, like Star Wars is a perfect example.
Right.
He destroys the Death Star, and after that, he goes into intense training.
Yeah.
So it's not like he just arrived as the hero,
perfect.
right?
That's perfect.
Like he's actually
the fisherman got in
right,
the
you know. So he Obi-Wan, and just so you know, the guy dies in all the stories,
right?
You know, like so. The
right.
You're the pastor guy.
So
you're the pastor guy. You're not making it to the
right.
end. Like,
no wilderness or no. I got you.
Right. So it's our point as guides and coming alongside is to die. It's not about us when we're going into this. When we're coming alongside people.
Did you hear that, pastors?
Like, you know, it's like, my favorite modern day hymn is The Wonderful Cross, and it says to bid me come and die to find that I might truly live. And that's the crux of it. That's why I love the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Because when I die and I experience that revelation, I find that, no, I actually have life. And so I would encourage everybody, we mentioned we have these in the show notes, and go take a look, but you can walk through the entire hero's journey. You can walk through Peter's, and there's a lot of questions.
So you have that all written out?
All that.
That's
and
awesome.
And Jessie has an entire course, not just the book, but an entire course online. And it will walk through the different elements of not just the hero's journey, but of the different things that you're going to be facing along the way.
So if somebody wants to take that course, like how do they go about to do that?
Yeah, the course is available on Whoology.co. So that's WHOOLOGY.co. And there you can access the course. You can get the different downloads for diagrams because and those are free. Like we just want you to have those. Yeah. Not the course, but the downloads are free.
I mean, we can't give away everything.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? These things take time. These things take time.
But you can go there. You can also pick up my book, Ordinary Discipleship, which helps walk you through as a disciple maker how to look and help a disciple with each one of those places.
Awesome. Wow, guys. Thank you so much. That was really informative. That was a power-packed 15 minutes, don't you think, Jacob? Thank you so much for joining us on Ordinary Discipleship Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time. Make sure to go and like, subscribe, leave a comment if you're enjoying this podcast. If not, then just don't do anything, all right? God bless you. Have a great night. Bye-bye.